Hello, this is a quick lesson about psychology's 7 integrative themes and the 5 pillars of psychology. So, in this course, we will be learning a lot about psychology. There are hundreds of concepts. The model that we will be using to organize our learning is this model here. So, imagine a large Greek architectural building. It has a nice sturdy base and it has these pillars and then an arching roof, a vaulted roof. In our model, the base is represented by research methods because remember, psychology uses the scientific method. So in order to do a good job with understanding psychology, you have to be able to understand the principles of good research method. One way to think about the pillars is to imagine it's like a sample platter or a flight of beer. The benefit of a sampler platter is you get to taste a little bit of all these different things. You're not going to have a whole meal of any one food and not a whole pint of any one beer. It's a sample. If you don't like something, then you've had a taste and you can move on to a different one. And if you really like something, you can dive into it and have a little bit more. But overall, you get a broad breadth of taste. Now, the disadvantage of the pillars potentially is what it could lead to is to have a course where you say, okay, this unit is the biological stuff. We've learned it, we're done, let's move on. This unit's the cognitive stuff. We've done it, we're going to move on. The problem with that approach is it can lead to a feeling of theoretical whiplash or a disconnection, not understanding that, yes, these are different topic areas, perspectives, domains, but really they are all connected. So the American Psychological Association, the APA, has suggested this model instead, recommending that professors teach at least 2 topics from each of these 5 domains, but they provide them on top of a base of research methods and they connect them with 7 integrative themes. Now, the integrative themes are helpful because they help us to organize and separate the concepts as well as showing how they're related. So think back to being a kid. I bet you collected rocks for at least a short time. Most kids do. So think about that rock collection. For most kids, it's a bucket of rocks. And that's because they're drawn to the shape or the color of the rocks, but they might not know much about what makes those rocks special. However, if you teach them, well, here's 3 different types of rocks. You've got igneous and metamorphic and sedimentary. And look, some rocks have these elements and some rocks have these elements. Suddenly, you don't have a bucket of rocks. You have a collection. You have a way to organize and connect your knowledge so that each rock is special by itself, but it also has a place within the broader collection. And that's what these themes do. Each domain is special. So for example, I'm a social psychologist by training. My PhD is in social psychology. So this is my home. This is how I view the world. These are the questions that I ask. These are the answers that I fall naturally to. And these are the theories that I'm most familiar with. I have some friends who fit under this area. They're more likely to talk about disorders and therapies and how to manage your life and stay healthy. And I have some friends who are in this area. They're all about, well, how do we think and remember and things. That doesn't mean that we ignore the others. This is just our primary perspective of the world. However, most psychologists have some familiarity with all of these, and we see them as a whole. So let's take a look at these 7 integrative themes. Remember, the goal of the themes is to connect the 5 pillars. At the end of a whole course, you will have learned hundreds of concepts, and I don't expect that you will remember all of these for the rest of your lives. But what I am hoping is you will remember these 7 themes as the principal ideas of psychology as a science. So here they are. We'll come back to them periodically throughout the semester. The first is that psychological science relies on empirical evidence and adapts as new data develops. So in class, we talked about why psychology counts as a science, even if it's a different type of science than things like geology or chemistry. And that's because of this empirical evidence. Remember, this is evidence that is collected using our senses or tools, and that's what we use to make conclusions. So we're not just making stuff up. We're actually collecting and analyzing data. What's best about science, though, is that this is an area where it is perfectly okay to be wrong because we adapt as we develop new data. We change our theories, we update them with new information. So hearing a news bite, well, scientists have found that what they previously thought isn't true, that's not a bad thing. That's an exciting thing. It means, hey, we learned something new. And that means that science is always waiting. There's always something to be discovered. So that's one of these theories, one of the themes. The second theme is that psychology explains general principles that govern behavior while recognizing that there are individual differences. So, what I challenge you to do during this semester and in your later psychology courses is sometimes you will find a theory that explains a general principle, but you think, well, that doesn't apply to me at all. I'm not at all like that. Instead of saying that theory must be wrong, you might say, that's an individual difference. Maybe people who come from my background or think the way I do or have these abilities, that theory applies differently to. And in fact, psychology is really good at saying things like, here's the general principle, but here's how this principle works in the classroom. Here's how it works on the sports field. Here's how it works for people with this mindset. So with all the theories that we talk about, we will often identify the individual differences that are part of it. The third theme is that psychological, biological, social, and cultural factors all work together to influence behavior and mental processes. So remember those themes, those pillars? It's tempting to say, well, which one is the best or which one is the right pillar, the right domain? Well, they're all correct. To have a full understanding of the human condition, you have to recognize that we are multifaceted. What causes depression? Well, there's psychological, biological, social, and cultural factors. What leads to happiness? Psychological, biological, social, and cultural factors. And we'll talk about those as we go through the semester. What are we on? The fourth theme is that psychology values diversity, promotes equity, and fosters inclusion in pursuit of a more just society. Remember, the theme of this course is make a difference with psychology. Your final project is focused a lot on this theme. How can you take a concept from this course and use it to make a difference in the world? How can you use what you've learned to make the world more easy to access for more people, more gentle, more kind, more fair? And psychology hasn't always had the best past with this, as with any science or social institution, but we're trying to improve that. And a lot of the refinements to how we teach psychology emphasize the importance of inclusion and diversity. So we'll talk more about that this semester as well. So now we're on 5. The fifth one is that our perceptions and biases filter our experiences of the world through an imperfect personal lens. All right, so this one is complex. What this means is psychology is less about absolute truth than understanding how people form their own truths. Everybody has some perceptual filter and some bias. All of us have an upbringing. All of us have a cultural heritage. All of us have recent experiences. And all of that stuff acts like a colored lens over our eyes. And that can influence how we see the world. Usually it doesn't change reality, but it might shift the color. One person might see the same situation slightly differently than the other person. Now, in some parts of the course, we'll specifically look at those biases. But in other parts, I just want you to keep this in mind as we go through, because history or time, your location in time, can act as one of those perceptions. So we will talk about some theorists, and you might say, well, that's a ridiculous, what a sexist thing to say, or what a racist thing to say. And the thing to remember is people change over time. And so even science that tries to be objective still exists in a certain time period, and often it reflects the thoughts of that time period. Good science allows us to adapt and change and update things whenever we can. The sixth theme is that applying psychological principles can change our lives, organizations, and communities in positive ways. Again, this comes back to how can you make a difference in the world with psychology? And that's the theme of our final project and the whole course overall. And finally, ethical principles guide psychological research and practice. We don't have free rein to do whatever we want. We tend to have this idea of the mad scientist or the evil psychologist. They make really good villains in murder mystery shows. In truth, we have ethical principles we have to follow, both if you're going to be a clinician and provide therapy, if you're going to be a researcher, or if you're going to be a professor. And we'll talk about some of those when we get to the next chapter, in chapter 2. So those are the 7 themes that I want you to be aware of. So remember, we have a foundation of research methods. We have 5 pillars or domains that hold up this connecting roof of 7 integrative themes. I hope this helped, and I will see you in class later on. Thank you.